So we now have our little segment here on Nala. Now, as much as I was woe to cover this one, this has turned out, when I was doing the research for this, this is one of the more interesting topics, and it gets into a legal doctrine which I have not covered on this channel. Can you believe that? It took an e-thought to get into a legal doctrine I have not covered, and I've covered a lot of stuff. And we're going to go in a little bit of detail on this one. We're actually going to watch through. The video that allegedly contains violation of privacy, and we're going to go through the law. And I don't think anybody else has analyzed this because it's a brand new issue. And I'll explain what's going on here. Obviously, the two, and I say this, by the way, with no personal dog in this fight. I do not have any particular love lost for Pearl or either way. I don't care for Pearl. I don't care for Nala. I'm not subscribed to her OnlyFans or her Only Jesus. I don't know what it is right now, whatever she's got going on right now in terms of her financial grift. Obviously, for those that don't know, Pearl, a very famous commenter who came up via the manosphere, essentially taking stuff that was said by Myron, Fresh and Fit, and Rollo Tomasi, and repeating it, essentially. So just being a woman who is repeating quote unquote red pill talking points and just doing it in a very well produced and well managed, to her credit, running the business well, podcast, and coming to fame, pretty much repeating what men said as a woman, right? That's how she became famous. Nala over here, this other character, OnlyFans girl, rose to prominence. Well, this is her most famous face, being this one, rose to prominence and really saw her peak when she went on the Whatever podcast. So the Whatever podcast, obviously being a spin-off, like a wider version of the Fresh and Fit podcast, set in California. They had her on. OnlyFans girl, she kind of rose to prominence off that, got peak subs off that, and that enabled her grift. Well, now she has said that grift and that she used to have should not be talked about at all whatsoever. So let's get into this one. Let's see. Where do we start? Okay, here we go. So here's the actual document that came out. This is courtesy of Andrew Wilson on X, who posted this. And this is essentially a lawsuit, in my opinion, but we'll get into it. Violation of Nala Ray's privacy rights. Confidential settlement communications subject to Federal Rule of Evidence 408, all rights reserved. Okay, so real quick, and I'm going to cover this rule that she totally gets wrong here. Federal Rule of Evidence 408 has nothing to do with the communications themselves being quote unquote confidential. You don't get to invoke top secret privilege under Federal Rule of Evidence 408. What you get to do under 408 is you get to have evidence not used against you in court. So what, and this is 408 right here. I'm going to pull this up so you guys see it. And I know it's hard to read, so I'm just going to read this for you guys. But just so you know, I'm reading 408 here. So Federal Rule of Evidence 408. This is compromises and offers to compromise. So furnishing or offering to furnish or accepting or offering or proposing or promising to accept a valuable consideration in compromising or attempting to compromise a claim which is disputed as to either validity or amount is not admissible to prove liability for or invalidity of the claim or its amount. Evidence of conduct or statements made in compromise negotiations is not admissible. This rule does not require the exclusion of any evidence otherwise discoverable merely because it is presented in the course of compromise negotiations. So essentially what this means is you can't use evidence of a settlement as proof of somebody's liability. So oftentimes people will say, well, the other party is guilty because they offered to settle. And why would they offer to settle unless they didn't think they were guilty? And that's a misstatement. Companies, for example, often offer to settle even though they're innocent just because it's not worth the lawsuit. It's not worth the pain in the ass, to use a technical legal term. And it's worth it to pay a couple $1,000s to have somebody go away as opposed to fighting in a protracted legal battle. So oftentimes companies, for example, might pay out $5,000 or $10,000 on a claim because it's not worth paying their own lawyer that. They'll pay their own lawyer 20, 30,000, right? You might as well get rid of them for 1 or 2,000. That doesn't mean that they are guilty. It just means there's a certain amount at which they're willing to just make you go away. So that's Federal Rule of Evidence 408. And that is what that means. So when they say in this document that this is quote unquote confidential, don't think about this like it's a top secret clearance, like you have to be a member of Doge to get access to it. That's not what this is. This is not. And so, yeah, this is not something that Andrew Wilson is going to get anybody in trouble for disclosing. So this is the rest. I'll read the rest. This is obviously addressed to Pearl. Pearl's name is obviously Davis. Her surname is Davis. This firm represents at Fitness Nala, aka Nala the Ninja or Nala Ray client, also known as Nala Ray. If you are represented by counsel, please forward this letter to counsel to respond directly. As you know, our client is an influencer who publishes content on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram and Meta. Over the years, our client has gained significant goodwill among the public associated with her professional success via social media outreach and content creation to millions of viewers and followers. By the way, of that content, much of it is pornographic, right? So just understand that much of what she has created for quote unquote content to millions of people is pornographic. Our client transitioned out of the adult content industry and is now publicly known as a follower of the Christian faith and publishes content that is led by Christian values and morals. Recently, our client learned that your YouTube channel, Just Pearly Things and Pearl Daily, is engaging in the spread of false, destructive, and or defamatory content about her as part of your self-described campaign against her directed towards her Christian faith and her past as an OnlyFans creator. You have frequently cast our client in a false light and have made false allegations and allusions to intentionally damage her. Defamatory remarks have been made to your audience of almost 2 million subscribers, exclusive of other platforms aside from YouTube. For example, you have made comments like she's grifting God. We're going to watch this video because it's linked down here. And the reason she was doing this is because she's trying to convert her followers to Christian followers that follow her and make money off TikTok. So she's trying to sue for privacy violations because Pearl is questioning the sincerity of her faith. Okay. As a background, just real quick, this girl, just in case you don't know, in case you want to get a little bit of background here, this girl is the same girl who no less than 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, OnlyFans model with 7,000 online boyfriends reveals why she doesn't date in real life. They got her photo right there. She talks about making $300,000 a month off of her Sims and refusing to date. And then converting that over to now I am suddenly Christian. Oh boy. I want to point out, and I think this is what Pearl is going to note, that there is a cycle with these things. And we'll get into it in more detail, and you're going to see what Pearl's saying here. But I created this lovely PowerPoint here. And in case you guys haven't, this is kind of the the life cycle that she's alluding to, that Pearl kind of alludes to, which many people have referred to in different ways as, perhaps putting on the sundress or taking the God pill, if you will. And it doesn't just happen with female creators, it happens with male creators as well. It happens with a lot of dating coaches, manosphere people, porn industry people, men and women, where they start out, they're new, they're the new thing, the hot new thing. They reach a peak popularity. So this is obviously when she was on whatever podcast, she was peak popular. They then at some point, when they get pushback, when they have problems, when they're not getting as much as they were before, they suddenly have a conversion either to religion or a moral grift. Now, it's not everybody, but it's a significant enough number of people that you could call it a trend. And so they go through a thing, and you can see this, for example, with Mia Khalifa. Mia Khalifa, famous adult pornographic actress, eventually, after she hit that peak popularity, suddenly hated the industry that made her popular and made her all of her money, and refused to stop using her porn name, her pornographic name, instead of her real name, despite quote unquote hating that industry. And then, of course, while they're doing this, they're replaced in the industry by new people. And I threw down here Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips, who, nowadays seem to be the girls everyone's talking about in the adult industry. Obviously, there's new girls coming in all the time that are doing crazy and extreme things, and it kind of circulates and circulates and circulates. And this works for many, many different industries. And we're going to see this. I think this is largely what Pearl is alluding to, but we're gonna hear her own words. So this is the video which is allegedly defamatory. We're going to show that, and then we're going to go over the elements and the unique legal doctrine that apply here.
Oh my God, this is why the men are.
So this is the alleged defamatory video, and we're going to watch the first 3 minutes of this. This is an interview. This is Pearl reacting to an interview with Michael Knowles. This is when she did her original conversion. We'll just watch the original, the first 3 minutes or so, and the document that Nala's lawyer sent alleges that the defamation took place around the 2-minute mark. So we'll look around the 2-minute mark. It's what's said. As is it defamatory? Is it a violation of privacy or not?
Are leaving because they don't want to fight this. They don't want to deal with the simp apocalypse.
You can be 100% certain you were about to hear the least Catholic thing you ever heard in your life.
Absolutely.
She got tag teamed on camera. That was what she did for a living.
3 heretics in one whatever studio. A correction from a. Yes, that's correct. You were 6 months ago. Now you're going to correct me on what the Bible says? Give real. Yeah. I'm not going to take correction from someone who's 6 months ago. That's insane.
I am your host, Pearl, and this is the Audacity Network.
Today. By the way, understand that with defamation, if it's involving a response or anything that you have consensually put out there in public or information that you've let the public know, that's principally not defamation. So for example, if you've gone out there and said, I like penguin meat, I'm a big fan of eating penguins. Penguins are tasty. They're delicious. And people condemn you for eating penguins. Greenpeace boycotts you. PETA gets angry at your penguin eating ways. You can't go back and sue people for defamation for saying you're a penguin eater because you've said it. You've said, I love penguin. It's delicious. Right? If you put information out there, you cannot go back and sue people for that and call that defamation.
Today, I have a special show for you. So I want to point out, a couple of months ago, I received so much hate on the internet because Michael Knowles.
Pearl should be used to it, to be honest. Pearl gets a lot of shit, so she should be used to it.
Interviewed a corn star. Now, as you guys know, we've seen this tale 1,000 times where women come to church after they've lived a life of doing God knows what. So this woman got tag teamed on camera. And I'm being honest here. That's literally what she did. She got tag teamed on camera. That was what she did for a living. They bring her on all of these podcasts after not even a year of taking off of corn and said, yes, Nala, we're going to make you a spokesperson for Christianity.
I do remember when this happened, and I do remember distinctly, and this is something I think even I mentioned because it was like a very recent thing where she converted, but she quote unquote converted to Christianity, but still had her OnlyFans up with pornographic material on it. So it was a very interesting situation when you're saying, well, I'm suddenly have this genuine Christian conversion, but at the time still had an OnlyFans up with graphic material. So I'll leave that to your discretion. And once again, be your own judge as to the sincerity you believe of people's conversions. Anyways, I'm going to play this without further ado because I want to get to the defamatory stuff.
Now, her and her husband have started a Jesus clothing line, right? And now they're going around preaching. Now, when men see craziness going on in a church, what they tend to do is that masculine men just have a tendency to leave. They say, this is crazy. Church has become a concert and there's all these ex-corn stars. I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not going to fight for power. I'm not going to do all that. I'm just going to leave, right? And that's what we're seeing, especially in Protestant churches. Women have all of the power in these churches.
I had a very big, I wouldn't say issue, but it was a very controversial video that she made about me.
And what did the video say? It said, guys, I don't know if I'm going to trust an ex-corn star. That she did an overnight conversion. Maybe let's wait until she does some work. Maybe just a little bit of, could we require, maybe a test on her biblical knowledge to see if she's actually reading her Bible before we give her all the praise of, guys, when she went on this show, she didn't even delete her OnlyFans yet.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. There's a statement, which I believe is true. And of course you have the luxury of saying that, I've had this conversion after you made 9 million.
She had raised the prices. And the reason she was doing that is because she's trying to convert her followers to Christian followers that follow her and now make her money off of TikTok. So by the way, so far, I've heard nothing defamatory and I've heard nothing that is a violation of privacy. Mind you, privacy, and we'll get into the claim itself, involves painting someone in a false light or exposing certain facts that were not known. Nothing I've heard so far is a problem. Let's give it another minute of this video and see if we hear anything that is crazy bad. If the Christianity was the most important thing, she would have good answers to her understanding of Christianity.
I had to just pray. I needed.
There we go again. My favorite Christian woman shaming tactic. I'll pray for you. You know what? When women tell me that they're going to pray for me, when you're using God as a way to insult me, like a backhanded insult, I would rather you just tell me to go F myself because that would be more honest. When women do that, I really want to tell them to take their prayers and shove it up. But I have a new leaf, so I'm gonna
pray because I felt like I was getting heated about it, and that wasn't the right attitude to have at all. Like, I really wanted to respond more in kindness than anything.
That is the time to put away Twitter or X now. The moment you start to actually get angry, put it away.
Put it away. It wasn't even, I deleted my Twitter. I don't have Twitter.
You did not do your homework before this interview. She was baptized in December of 2023. Video of her talking about her marketing plan was in January of 2024. Raised OnlyFans prices 4 times between January and May. Caught selling nudes as recently as this week. Restricted her own. Now, as you guys know, we've seen this tale.
Okay, so she dropped those. Now, if any of those things were not true, so these facts she put up here were not true, and she said them, then she might be hit with defamation. This is the only thing in the video. So I did watch the whole video. We're not going to watch all 19 minutes. If any of those things are not true, then that could be potential issues. But if they're true, then it's not looking as good for old Nala there. So let's get into some elements of her claim itself. So her claim, Nala versus Pearl, is an invasion of privacy. So these are the different bases for an invasion of privacy claim. An invasion of privacy claim is public disclosure of private facts. It has to be one of these things, right? So was anything disclosed that was private? Number 2, use of another person's name or likeness. Once again, and this would be a image or likeness that is private and not public. Placing someone in a false light in the public eye. Intruding upon another's seclusion. So the thing she would be really hampering on is a false light. This really looks like if it was anything, painting a false light, saying she's not a Christian when she really is. Let's go over to some of the stuff to talk about. Number one, obviously we talked about this is not confidential. This is the statement was simply inadmissible to prove liability. Here's the thing. There is a doctrine because of free speech called ecclesiastical abstention. And anybody who's been to church, ecclesiastical means of the church. Of the church. So what this says, and this is based on this, there's many cases, but the case I like is Mammon versus SCI Funeral Service of Florida. There was a person who wanted to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, but they didn't meet the cemetery standard for being a Jew. So essentially the cemetery said, you are not Jewish enough to be buried here. And the court said, hey, we're not in the business of deciding who is compliant with your religious requirements. Because think about this. If the church, if the courts had to get involved in religion and had to get involved in whether somebody meets certain religious standards, that violates all sorts of principles. In addition to free speech, in addition to free exercise of religion, right? Because you're interfering in the internal workings of the church. They're getting into no true Scotsman, but for religion. And they don't want to go down that road. They don't want to touch that. Think about what you'd have to do. And there's no objective standard. It's subjective. Two different people, and especially in the Christian world. But this applies to Islam. This applies to Judaism. If I spoke to somebody who was an Orthodox Jew, and I said, "Would you consider people that are Reform to be true blood, right? You know, the true blue?" They would say no. If you talk to somebody who's Catholic, and you ask them if a Universalist, a Unitarian Universalist, is considered a Christian, they might say no. Right? And meanwhile, another Christian might look at somebody, I grew up in the Methodist church, but I've attended other churches. I was also rebaptized Catholic at one point. If you asked two different people in my Methodist congregation growing up, which was split between very liberal and very not liberal, very conservative and very liberal sides, two different people in the church would have two different opinions as to whether or not somebody was a good Christian or a faithful Christian. Two separate people. They would say, one person would say, yeah, they're fine. The other person would say, nope, they're not. So getting involved in that is a no-go. And even with pastors, we had in my church, we had, I think, 6 different pastors when I was growing up. Each of them was different. Some of them were very permissive, and other ones were very strict. So the privacy tort, the issue is she is a public figure, and all of the things she did were consensual. She didn't get hoodwinked into going on these podcasts. She openly was an adult creator. She wasn't a person who hid her face. In fact, her face, the ahigo face or ahigao, I can never say it right. Right. Ahigao face. Like, that was known. Her face was on this. She can't ever hide from that. And she put all this information out there about herself and what she did. She was open about it. She said her father supported her. This was not something that was hidden. So to talk about that and bring that up again doesn't really go against any privacy issue. So saying, look, she openly was talking about this, and then now she has had this, cyclical, as we talked about, she's hit this part of the cycle. Talking about this cycle is not a crime or does not expose you to liability, because this cycle applies for me. I could replace her face with Mia Khalifa and it's the same thing. It's the same cycle of comes in the business, hits popularity, converts, becomes moral, or gets married, whatever, and the new girls come in to replace him and they get on the cycle. And the cycle continues and continues and continues. It never stops. So what do I think happens to that? I think it is likely to be dismissed or never filed. I think because of coverage like my coverage, and other people's coverage on this, because I think I am the first lawyer to talk about this. No other lawyers have talked about this. I think that if she watches my stream or her lawyer watches it, thank God, this is essentially a lawsuit. And it's being called out for that. I don't think it gets anywhere. It'll be dismissed. If it gets through a motion to dismiss, I will be shocked. But I do think it will lose even before summary judgment. But that said, the one thing she will get is she is going to get more followers and simps. And this is something that's very much true. And you see it with Mia Khalifa. So Mia Khalifa will come out and say she hates the porn industry and come out and denounce it and make all these controversies, etc., because putting yourself in that public light gets you more followers and simps. And in a way, even me covering it does that. But that said, I'm a lawyer. What I do is cover stuff. So it's neither here nor there. It gets you publicity by acting up. It's sort of the, bad behavior gets you attention. So you're going to do the bad behavior thing. Flinging the poop gets you just as much attention as getting a straight A in math. So you're going to fling the poop, right? This is her flinging it, because I think this lawsuit is, and that's my professional opinion, I do believe it is not a good lawsuit. It is not strong at all whatsoever. But, bring attention to yourself one way or another, right?